Despite its hundreds of pages of evidence and explanation, there remain questions about what to think of the Mueller report, what it found, how it was handled, what's left to know, and what to learn. To talk about all that, we invited Mary McCord, who was Acting Assistant Attorney General at the Department of Justice.
Thank you for coming.
And headed up the Russia investigation before Robert Mueller took it over in 2017. And former federal prosecutor John Flannery, who's followed the whole thing closely since the beginning. First, the overall impression.
Is this report exoneration, damnation, or is it somewhere in between?
I think it's damnation. I think it could have gone further given the facts, which is the advantage of this report. The facts allow us to draw conclusions that Mueller was reluctant to draw. The most obvious one is whether or not there should have been a prosecution or an alleged crime for obstruction. And he went through this kind of Jesuitical trap, in my opinion, in which he said, I can't prosecute him because he's a sitting president and we have a rule against that. And I don't think it's fair to say that he committed a crime if he can't defend it in a court of law. So I'm not going to say it's a crime, but then I'm going to lay out facts that are criminal.
McCord is not as critical of Mueller, but she still finds the lack of an obstruction charge curious.
There are a number of actions taken by the president that certainly to a layperson, I don't know how you could come away without thinking he obstructed justice, or tried to.
Same with collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. It might not be a crime, but it certainly seems present.
I don't know how you could come away without the abiding feeling that this was a campaign that very much encouraged, delighted in almost the work of the Russian government.
Attorney General William Barr's description of the report in his letter in March and again in his news conference yesterday did not accurately describe what it says, and that's unsettling.
What it didn't address at all was the enormous volume of evidence going both to the very, very strong interest and encouragement of people within the Trump campaign, including the president himself, interest and encouragement to Russia to continue with its interference activities, and it didn't begin to discuss the voluminous evidence that supports the president's attempts to obstruct justice.
In my memory, there's never been a press conference about a report that was going to be released in which, at the worst case, it wasn't released simultaneously with the press conference. So he wanted to convince us, in the ministry of truth, if you will, what we should believe, kind of a newspeak kind of approach.
And I thought that it was an attempt to sort of create the narrative and color the narrative so that as people read it, they're already going in with a certain frame of mind.
To color it and create a narrative that suits the president, though.
That suits the president, yes.
There are parts of the investigation that have been reported about publicly that seem not to have led anywhere.
Why didn't we call any of the family members? This investigation stopped at the waters of Trump and family and finances, and that's the motherlode there. Why wouldn't you go for the gold, literally?
And Flannery has a theory about that.
This investigation was over when it shouldn't be over. Here you had just seized you'd asked the grand jury to continue another 6 months in January, okay? Yeah. So now, sometimes you do that for a whole variety of reasons, but they anticipated doing something. They conducted searches of Stone's house, a whole bunch of material there. It takes time to analyze it. Maybe there's nothing there, but they're already telling us the investigation's over when that happens. Cohen is being debriefed and giving more information to the Southern District and to the investigation in the special counsel's office. The special counsel mentions it in the obstruction section of the report. So why did it stop? We may know in 2 weeks, we may not know for 20 years, but something went wrong here.
McCord says people should read the report and not lose sight of what happened in 2016.
But I don't want people to forget that this interference, Russia didn't just stop after this, after the last election. And so as people think about what they're choosing to read on the internet or in social media, or what they're viewing when they're taking in news and when they're learning about candidates and they're considering their options for the upcoming election, they need to exercise some real thoughtfulness and discretion about the source of the information.
Should Mueller testify? testify, Mr. President.
There are more than a dozen criminal referrals arising from the Mueller investigation. The case is not closed, far from it. Keith Bogue, CBC News, Washington.